With the architecture, we can see, okay, that really eccentric style of the 60s. Okay, Cambodia is the only country in Southeast Asia to have a very original style in the 60s. The 60s, but from 1955, of course, to 1970, a real revolution occurred in Cambodia. For Sihanouk, who became, I would say, the head of a state at that time, and who abdicated in order to become the head of a state, because he couldn't be, I would say, it couldn't have been else had he remained the king. For Sihanouk, something had to change in Cambodia, and he really changed the country in a very revolutionary way. Building of, I would say, new industry, revolutionizing education, building a number of new schools, and so on and so on and so on, and especially architecture. The architectural landscape was entirely changed. For instance, okay, many young architects like Van Molivan, Van Hap, who were trained in France, okay, began working in Cambodia. They built the new Phnom Penh, as we know nowadays, and of course places like KEP. Okay. In KEP, many Cambodian and foreign architects came. Okay. At that time, every rich person in Phnom Penh who was a civil servant, a successful businessman, someone working in showbiz, and so on and so on, should have had his house here in KEP. And all those houses, most of them are still visible now, date back from the 60s, with all, I would say, those architectural eccentricities of the 60s, those revolutionary shapes and so on. They were a bit at that time. The 1960s intending to do something absolutely new. It's absolutely new, with shapes which were never been before, by the use of angles, for instance, combinations, new combinations of volume, and so on and so on. It was a very groovy place, and it was in the same time the place where the king, he was not king anymore, he abdicated in 1955 in order to get into politics, I mean Norodom Sihanouk. But it was a place where he was spending a lot of time, and to be seen with the king, to be seen at the place where the king was shooting his own films was something very important for the layman. For instance, the king made films here. Okay, at the time he made film just on the beach right there, which was the Mermaid Beach. As the sand was not that beautiful, the king used to bring, before shooting his film, something like several tons of white sand in order to make it look nicer. I would say those people, the people who owned this building, were precisely the victims of the Khmer Rouge regime. You know that in April 1975, the Khmer Rouge emptied all the towns in Cambodia, and the town dwellers, like Phnom Penh, Battambang, Kampong Cham, and Kampot as well, the town dwellers were certainly the first people to suffer, okay, from the Khmer Rouge regime, as most of the owners of those buildings in KEP were Phnom Penh dwellers, and they were not the poorest. Okay, those people, big part of them left Cambodia before 75, or some of them in the last minute, with the last plane. The biggest number of them died. Okay, died after having been evacuated from Phnom Penh 2 days after the town was taken by the Khmer Rouge. Those who survived, okay, came back, okay, for some of them, but they could never own, okay, their former properties. There was not a new law, but the government stipulated that the people who, from January 79, were working or were occupying one place, okay, had to be considered as the legitimate owners. Well, the building is called the Queen's Mother and the Queen's Father's house as well. What happened is that those buildings suffered from the war after January 79 between the Khmer Rouge and the Vietnamese, and the war was particularly violent here because there were this place, and the Kampot region was a real Khmer Rouge stronghold, and they stayed here till I would say the late 1990s. I remember, for instance, they could capture and execute a few months later a French, an Australian, and a Brit without any problem. Okay, it means that from, let's say, 1972. Even before the Khmer Rouge took power in Phnom Penh, till the late 1990s, the region was a Khmer Rouge region. Okay, so you can imagine there were many fightings, first between the Vietnamese and the Khmer Rouge, then between the Khmer Rouge and the government army of the People's Republic of Cambodia, and so on. So it means that those houses suffered a lot from this fighting, but they mainly suffered from local population. You know, the fact is that the people and what I would call the new riches in Phnom Penh now, who last bought the land, because there was a kind of revolution in Cambodia from 2005 to 2008. That kind of madness of the properties and things like that. But the new owners, I don't think that they would be very much in favor of that old 1960s style. On the contrary, I think that the ideal now in Cambodia, the architectural ideal, is somewhat is something which looks like Sino-Thai Barocco, you know, with a lot of golden motifs, although not made out of gold, golden. Many fat angels, Corinthian columns, and things like that. We have already a few good examples here in KEP. It's difficult to be optimistic about the future of Cambodia when we talk about development, for the simple reason that I would like them to preserve the few buildings, a few things to restore. I don't think it's going to be the case, and I'm a bit afraid by the published development programs we have been doing till now.